So
Jason, are we rolling right now? You know it's coming.
yeah.
Hi, guys.
Hello.
Randy, Jason.
Yes.
Hey, did
Cool.
did you say that a lot when you guys were recording?
Well, we're usually right next to each other, so it was pretty easy.
Yeah,
You
Yeah.
you would know if you were rolling.
As you saw. So
we're rolling.
Yeah.
yeah. So I just want to thank Randy Erickson from the Crosse Tribune. He's going to join us for a little conversation. We're going to take a look at one of our songs, 77 Summer, and just kind of look at some of the origins of it and then look at some of the details of the tracks and different things that went into making it. And hopefully it's interesting to some of our fellow musicians and songwriters out there. So Casey, can you talk about like where the idea came from? Like just, I mean, what happened? Like how you came up with the riff or how you come up with riffs in general?
I just noodle around and like a lot of, I happen to have the guitar here. Kind of a weird accident. I just like it's kind of this Stonesy thing, really. I thought it was kind of, had this kind of swagger to it. And then I just recorded it back in probably 2004 or 5 on my BR8. And it was one of those ideas. I think at some point we were going through ideas, and that was one of the things I showed you. And right,
Yeah, I think it was the summer of 2015. We were like, actually, I think I was in town to do some recording for like the first batch of songs,
Yep.
like the first 3 songs we worked on. And I mean, that sort of happened a lot where we'd be like, we had business on our mind to get done, but then like other ideas would pop up, or we'd just be like, hey, let's force ourselves to come up with something new. And
Yeah.
I definitely remember like you had, oh, I've got this idea, and we spent like maybe, 20 minutes just recording it. And if you're curious, I've got like a rough version of that first like guitar bit here that we recorded. I mean, not your original one, but it'd be kind of fun. I thought it might be kind of fun to listen to it.
Definitely.
The progression is different.
Yeah.
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 I forgot the progression was different then.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think it's a good example of like how a lot of this stuff came together where, Casey would usually come in with, but usually his ideas, at least by the time he brought them to me, was like 2 parts. He always had like a verse part and sort of a chorus B section. And in this case, we were playing with it a little bit, and I think I took it home. I mean, usually I would take it home and just kind of really mess with it and throw it back at Casey and hope that he liked it, and sometimes he did, and sometimes
Most of it.
yeah,
Most of the
yeah.
time.
Fortunately for me, you're very open to it. So, but
So Casey, is that something that you do a lot? Like record snippets of like riffs and chord progressions when they strike you?
Yeah, because I've learned in the past that if I don't, I'll forget them. Like, because I've been in situations where even with like Porcupine or past bands, and you'll be playing something, and then we'll all kind of go, I'll remember that. And then you get in your car, listen to the stereo, and it's because it was always like little, even if you remember the shape of the chord or the riff, like there's always a dynamic about it that you forget if you don't record it. So I have, I just use my phone now. Or
do you have a secret for keeping track of them all?
I kind of just have them
chaos.
Yeah.
I have a voice recorder on my phone, and I just will like put little, like if it's, I don't even know what, I think this was called, like it just it was something about summer that I always thought about with.
I think you had it originally, like when you presented it to me, you called it like summer 1977.
Yeah.
I think it was that was there, and then we quickly changed it just to like 77 summer because it was more interesting. But that, I mean, I think that idea was like of summer in 1977 was there from the get-go.
So what was there something about that riff that said 1977 to you?
I think so. I just started thinking about being a kid and like what the context of the song, the lyrical context. That's what I thought about, is just being a kid. And
But did you have lyrics in mind at that point?
No.
Or okay, but the riff still had
kind of
feel to you.
I was just thinking about a certain point in time when I was a kid.
Yeah.
I wonder if it was that Stonesy feel. You know, again, you probably were like listening to Stones as a kid, maybe.
Yeah. Yep. I think I heard. That was about the time I heard.
That's a little bit before Some Girls came out.
Yeah, it was right before Some Girls came out. So it was a lot of like, well, it would have been probably classic rock radio, whatever.
Yeah.
Honky Tonk Woman, all that kind of stuff. But I remember I don't know why I thought of, it was just a point in time. I just thought of where I lived and just the feeling of,
How old were you then?
9 or 10.
Yeah.
11. Yeah.
I mean, that ultimately played into like the lyrics later. Well, we can talk about that a little later on, but
that was kind of I just thought of the sun and just the gravel roads. And I lived in this little town called Mining Creek Haven outside of Houston, Minnesota. Just a village that had a swimming pool, or swimming campground, like in this little valley. That was like my daily summertime thing, swimming.
Yeah, and the one thing I think is interesting too about this original idea with that, like you said, that chorus was different, but there's still some similarity in terms of like, like the fact that the timing of the chord changes. But I know specifically because I went in and sort of made a few little adjustments to the chords, and this happens a lot because Casey has this great way of being like quirky, and I'm oftentimes the one who like makes it more cliche. But it's like it's kind of like I was like, okay.
I think you found a good, medium ground there.
Yeah, I mean, it was really because there's actually the meter. I mean, the measure count is a little bit off, and I love that. Yeah. And I mean, there actually is probably a version of this song where that particular chord progression is the chorus, and it's awesome. But for some reason, there's it goes. I mean, the one thing is, it goes. If you listen to this chord progression in the chorus. Let's do it. So it kind of goes down. It's kind of, and I remember thinking what if it goes up? Going up a little bit more, and then also being a little more of a, regular sort of 8-bar count, kind of, and basically I remember just kind of recording a lot of things about this chorus still remain in terms of overall feel, but just a few key things are changed, and then just again throwing it back to Casey, and then at that point we started playing with vocal stuff over it, and that's the next version I have we could listen to real quick of just him. This is again part of the usual process was we'd get it to a certain point, and then put Casey in front of the microphone, and he'd be just kind of scatting and trying different ideas. And this is there were other ideas that we don't have recorded here, but this is kind of the version we ended up with.
Is
mean, so you can hear like the bones of the song are really there at that point.
Yeah.
So was that recorded in 2015? Like that was the original when you came up with that riff, or did that come later?
No, I think that, I mean, we did the original riff and then basically we just moved on to other stuff. And then what happened a lot was I would take it back to Chicago and just goof around, like add a lot of little sparkly bits here and there, and then send those back to Casey and just run it by him. And if he liked them, then we would move forward. And so this was basically after adding some sparkly bits and coming back to La Crosse, and he would, sing over it and have like melody ideas and
yeah. So I mean, is that common for you, Casey, to sort of scat or wordless sing the melody before you come up with lyrics?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was just talking to Andrew Hughes from Tug about that last night, because he's like on his last record, he did everything vocals first, like lyrics first.
Oh.
And we were talking about, because we were talking about
like he wrote the lyrics first, like just wrote them on a piece of paper.
On his acoustic record, and
interesting.
I've done that maybe 3 times. I like the idea of having some sort of it just works best for me. And then I'm the worst at, like, I'll wait until the last minute, but it always seems to work, like lyrically. Like I'll kind of knock it around for a long time. And
so
sorry, go ahead.
It was weird, but in the scat version of that, it feels like you're already saying stuff about summer.
I
mean,
I think I'm subconsciously, like, as I'm going, kind of, maybe, but like in the what's the word I'm looking for? The meter of everything is kind of, kind of there. So it's funny listening to that. I haven't heard it in a long time, and I'm like, oh, it's kind of pretty close. Really.
Well, it's actually funny. It's like, we live with this version for a long time. I mean, with all these songs, so we always live with like versions that have him scatting stuff over it, and and then it can be somewhat jarring when we actually get to the point of like finalizing lyrics, and they don't sound exactly like the kind of made up stuff, and after a while, again, it's probably the same thing now where you're experiencing where like you're used to the final lyrics, and now going back to this other stuff, it's like, what was that?
Yeah.
But again, like the general shape of this thing is really in place here for the most part. And even like that. And the one thing I thought was interesting, and I've always loved about this song, is it's got that weird sort of like half verse in the opening. Like before this little sparkly guitar-y kind of thing. It's our Lindsey Buckingham ripoff section, but it just, for some reason, that just, I don't know how that came about, but I think that was part of the early experimentation process that happened to time out like that. And then the more we listened to it, the more we were like, oh, it's kind of interesting. And
I love that part.
So yeah, I thought that part was brilliant. Did that part come, like, did you have that sort of scene setting lyric in mind and add that part, or did you have that guitar sparkly bit thing in mind before you went into it?
I think that was before.
Okay.
The sparkly, the music came first.
The guitar came in, and then it was decided to kind of do a pre-verse intro thing.
Yeah, and then ultimately, I mean, you can hear like in this arrangement, the verse, that intro thing is very similar. It's got the main riff. It's very similar to the rest of it, but then eventually, like through the sculpting of you just like keep on chipping away at the marble. And eventually you're just like, well, let's make the opening feel more like an opening. And you strip it back to something that sounds different than the actual verse. And part of it, once we got to the lyrics, we were kind of laughing about it. We were like, that line is sort of like a Shakespearean prologue where, the main character comes out and is just like, here is what the play is about, and then, and to a certain extent, that line is kind of about, it's about memory, and it's about this, and it's like, and then you back off and you just get into the actual song.
Yeah.
And so if you're curious, I mean, I could jump then ahead to another version of it. Well, here, actually, this is the point where, once we got to that point and the song's roughly in place, then we were like, okay, now the brutal task of writing lyrics and making some final decisions about stuff. And
Yeah.
and I was gonna say, in this case, we did an interesting experiment where, from the beginning, Casey had that idea of it being about summer and just being a kid. And the more we talked about that, we were like, and also at this point, we'd already sort of written 3 songs that were really influenced by like relationship breakups and stuff like that. We both had experienced things like that in our lives, and we're like, let's write something different, that's not just about that. And so we're like, well, what are we going to do? We want to make it more, it's an kind of upbeat song. Let's make it kind of optimistic. And we just decided to have Casey, we were doing this sort of thing. We were remote. I was in Portland at that time. And I think Casey just pulled out his phone, and I just said, well, Casey, tell me a story about like what things were like when you were a kid, when you were that age. And so like Casey, do you mind if I play a little bit of this?
Sure, go ahead.
So this is just
I'm a babbling idiot.
but again, that was the whole point. It was just like, okay, like no, it has to. I was trying to. Yeah. At the time, if you'd known that we were going to eventually record this thing and play it for people, but again, I think the idea of like it being very free and just sort of like not having to worry about anything, you can just. Yeah. I mean, I think he was like, some of the things he was saying, he was, they could see their phrase in a way that could be lyrics. Other things were just statements, So here's the.
Mm-hmm. I'm gonna bike over to Tim's. Can you come out? Yeah, let's go down and swim. We would go down the hill on our bikes and swim. We'd grab candy. Hot, the sand's hot. You could hear the frogs in the pond next door. There were actually fish in the swimming pool. You could feel them hit your legs sometimes. I got used to it. Some people were freaked out by it, but Tim and I were not afraid. I couldn't hold my breath, so I had to plug my nose with one hand, which when I was underwater was frustrating because I would usually swim in a circle. I taught myself to swim.
So I mean that's the general idea, and you can hear like there are actually some lyric lines that were directly lifted from that.
Yeah.
And and we.
Well, I love the way he turned around, hold his breath to breath on hold, which kind of led to the rhyme with growing old. And I like how you, Casey, or maybe it was you, Jason, I don't know.
It's hard to keep track at that point. We're both we're both chiming in, going back and forth.
Yeah, but I love how the first time around it goes, look out, we're growing, and then it goes, look out, we're growing old, and then in the next verse it's look out, it's glowing. It was just such a cool lyrical scheme.
Yeah, I mean, thanks. I mean, we fall into that, and it's all very deliberate. I mean, we agonized over.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if you'd be in our conversations about lyrics for this one and ending song and other stuff, it was just like we'd agonize over an or a the or lots of little things, and also like, and one of the things we oftentimes would talk about was, we were trying to be more direct in these lyrics than we maybe have read in the past, and so we were like, it was always trying to balance like, okay, we love poetic lyrics, but it's like, where do you ride the line between being sort of poetic and interesting and being just like direct and calling it out, and also going over the line and being cheesy, and maybe cheesy is okay, and we had those conversations all the time.
Yeah, which that's why I like working with Jason, because it's conversations that I love to have, because it's fun to write like that, and we push each other and like, let's think about this, like, let's not take the easy route, let's be a little vulnerable, let's maybe I'll do something lyrically that I haven't done ever. I mean, God knows the vocals are loud, and We don't know how I am about that. But in context, I listened to it and I'm like, there's just no other way it would work, from burying the vocals. I mean, it's, and the lyrics are meant to be heard.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm grateful.
Have there been other songs where you've done this kind of a brainstorming process, or was that unique to this song?
All of them, I think.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we didn't do quite this same approach in terms of like we didn't do the the storytelling, but in terms of like typically we actually, especially the first three, were there was a lot of just talking about just life and sort of like some of the the rougher situations we both experience in relationships and stuff, and that usually just kind of sometimes that would just lead to direct, we would pull a phrase or a thought directly from a conversation we'd had 2 hours ago, and just that's how it just felt natural once we figured out what the songs were going to be about roughly. And then other songs like this song and an ending song was also ending song was kind of about a sort of relationship or something going away. We thought it could be death. We thought it could be relationship ending, but we were purposely trying to keep it sort of somewhat of it with a tinge of optimism and maybe acceptance. But anyways, so I think lyrically it was always like that. It's a scary thing to start with a blank page. It's really hard.
So this song seems to work on multiple levels. I mean, on the surface, it's about it's sort of nostalgic, and it's about the going to the pool and going to your friend's house and going out to play. But I don't know. It seems like there's more to it. And is that just me, or did you guys have something else in mind?
I mean, I think I'm just trying to kind of make it as a whole, like, how do I word this without sounding like a dumbass? Well, I was just trying to make the lyrics and the sonic, the sound of the song and how it moves. I wanted it all to kind of match up, and I think it worked really well. I mean, I'm not going to say it was like there's a little bit of melancholy in there.
Yeah.
And I don't want to get into that, but I mean, my childhood was kind of different, it was a little crazy. So, I mean, summertime to me was like where back in the day, and, you could leave at 8 o'clock in the morning and not show up till supper time, so it was like my time for me to kind of be by myself away from chaos.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's why I attached to it so much. But anyway.
Well, and I do think that like the choruses have gone a slightly different direction. I mean, I think we were talking about like it being sort of like basically talking about like not losing the optimism of youth in a way, like just sort of like that was kind of how we looked at like that idea of don't lose summer sun. Although I remember at one point we were kind of joking about like, because as we were kind of coming up with these lyrics, we were like, I think we were like, what was it like, hey, we've got life all figured out, so don't do it. It could feel a little bit like preachy, and so we were like again trying to like ride that fine line between like being optimistic and sort of conveying that idea without making it feel
preachy.
Yeah, I mean even like the line "Don't lose the summer sun." It's like that's kind of what it is about, like don't lose that sort of sense of optimism. And we had that in there most of the lines, and then we were like, that line does feel a little preachy, and we use it a couple times, but that's why I think we ended up going with "Under the Summer Sun" more often than not, just to kind of like you just sort of you set the scene a little bit more, and it's just more about the feeling.
Yeah, take some of the weight off it.
Yeah.
I was kind of curious about the line in the chorus, "Don't be fooled." Um, what's the story with that?
It's hard to remember.
I don't know. I suppose.
But easy to feel, right?
Yeah.
I guess. What do you think, Casey?
I guess. I don't know. I suppose
What is it? What is the whole? What's the whole phrase? Is what's don't listen, under the summer sun? Don't be fooled.
Yeah.
You
won't even see it slip away.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. Is just
or
like
feel it slip away.
yeah, I think it's sort of like that idea that you grow up, and even though it can sometimes feel like it's happening slowly, like your optimism and your that sort of sense of looking at the positive things can get whittled away. And,
yeah, and to embrace the time,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
embrace it. And for me, like, a little off topic, but I always want to be a kid, inside. I think you should always try to look at things with some childish enthusiasm, because maybe that's why I like to play music, because it gives me an excuse to be a dork. But
hey, yeah.
but you know what I mean? You should always try to keep that. I mean, I miss that innocence of being a kid, because when everybody knows, we all know, you get older and responsibility, and you feel like you need to be you need to just kind of lose that, and I just don't agree. You should always be kind of a kid. Randy, I like that about you.
That's right.
I see that in you, and I love that. Like, you have that as well. Like, that's why I love this. You have this youthful enthusiasm about music, and that's, you agree. I mean,
I guess I do.
I love that. Some people, they get so, they give up music, or they turn it into like a job. And I'm getting off topic.
So we'll play a little bit of this here. So this is like the version after this is what the version that we had after the lyrics were first running. So this is with the scratch vocals.
Okay.
There's a time that's real, hard to recall, but easy to feel.
So again, like the opening is still like the old like full band kind of thing. And then this is I'm just gonna jump around. This is
Look out, we're growing old. Under the summer sun, don't be fooled. You won't even feel it slip away. Under the summer sun, such a big world. Such a big world.
one thing about this version that I think is interesting is one part of the song that gave us a lot of problems, or not problems, but we just kind of put off to the end, was the musical break. And like right at this point in the evolution, I think it was just like a little electronic key, like a Rhodes kind of So it's. Kind of did that for like 8 bars, and we were kind of thinking like, well, that it could either be that or it could be something above that. And we actually at one point, like, this started out kind of being sort of like, okay, we're gonna make it sound kind of 70s-ish, and I think I'm just incapable of doing that because I'm such an 80s guy, so I keep on pushing things in that direction. And so we had like, Casey's like, what about trumpets or something? You had sort of horns,
really?
And I think I did some kind of little horn thing at some point, like a melody, like a little horn solo, I should say, and it sounded like basically like Howard Jones. Yeah. But like bad Howard Jones.
Okay.
Because I love Howard Jones, it was not good. And I wish I couldn't find a version of that to show you, but it was kind of funny. I think the next thing about this, the evolution of the song that was kind of interesting was the ending, because if you I'll play this version of a song, which was like, we're pretty far into it at this point. We've got the the lyrics are in place and scratch vocals are in place. But if you listen to the end of the song, it's like it basically we always kind of circled back to the main riff. So this is how the last chorus, the end of the last chorus goes.
Don't lose the summer sun in such a big world. Such a big world. Such a big world. Such a big world. In such a big world. Such a big world.
And that just like it skipped, and this is how it actually ended.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were just going okay, end on the mysterious chord, whatever,
Yeah. Nothing wrong with that.
No, but
But-
we just kind of were, as we were talking about it, we were like, what if it just kind of felt like we wanted to go somewhere different,
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how we kind of like, we're just like goofing around with it, and it actually ended up we just transposed the main riff to a different key. I mean, it's essentially the same. I mean, you can't really pick out the riff necessarily, but it's the same rhythm of going back and forth between like, two chords essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And like this is the first version of it that we were playing with, and you can hear the one thing that's interesting about this is like there's a piano melody that's going, and it's very straight in this version, and you can to me it's like a really noticeable difference because it's like it's so much more boring, even though everything else is there.
Mm-hmm.
That's a mess.
Oops.
It always helps to hit solo.
Such a big world.
So it's like it's the chords and a lot of the feel is there, but it's a lot different than sort of like the melody that has a little more of a swing that we kind of had heard earlier in the song, which has got
Yeah.
Such a big world.
there's a little bit more like melodic direction to that.
Definitely.
That we were just like, okay, that's better, and again, those are like the evolutionary details that happen. And again, like in this version of the song, this is when we were starting to add some of the breaks, like the break right before the chorus, that first chorus.
Look out, we're growing under the sun.
So that thing, and then and also like the whole idea of sucking out after the, I think this version might have still had the piano only.
Mm-hmm.
Under the summer sun, don't be fooled.
But again, like, so it had the piano, but it's still like let's, again, like it's really like chiseling away at the marble where you're just like, well, what can we take out? What, how much can you take out and keep things interesting and, add dynamic shape to the whole, the production side of the song, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
It's like those little bits of interesting tidbits to keep the listener, engaged.
What's interesting was like if you think back to the 70s, the guitar solo was king, and in this song it's it's more subtle. It's not like a behold my magnificence kind of thing.
Sure.
And I think in a lot of your guitar work, Casey, it's a case where you don't do showy leads and more subtle work.
That's all Jason.
Is it?
Yep. The echo guitar.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, in this particular case, it was just like, it was a matter of like not having, it was like, okay, do we have a solo? And neither of us are really solo players. I mean, Casey's a much better guitarist than I am, but I think, he also would say he's not like your standard, guitar hero soloer. He comes up with really interesting and cool ideas more than anything. And, in this case, you know, I'm definitely not a soloing guy. I can piece things together in recording if I need to, but in this case, it was just like, well, let's make it more about a texture than a melodic solo.
Yeah.
And just like, it's like, this should be like, it's, I mean, we can solo up, we can get down to that point eventually where we listen to just that stuff, but it's like probably 8 or 10 different guitar parts, just kind of creating waves. And again, like just trying to make it feel something emotional and interesting more than like, you know, rock and roll star kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it really worked.
Yeah. Blooms. It just kind of takes off. That's what I like about the end too. The end really just pops out. It blooms.
Yeah.
Lack of a better way to describe it. It's just really fun.
Yeah.
But I think that general observation is definitely something that, you know, I'd say would you say that applies to you, Casey, in your approach to, you know, solos versus non-solos?
Yeah, I don't know what I'm doing.
But I didn't mean to suggest that.
I just kind of hear stuff and go, well, that'll work, and try to figure it out. Right. I think, yeah, I always like just more coloring than actual like figuring out a lead part. Maybe it's just I don't have the patience for it. I'm just not wired that way. But I like more like the feel of something than the technique part of it.
Yeah.
You know.
I get that.
Yeah, and this is I think the last early version. And by this point the opening was starting to come together too. It was this.
There's a time that's real.
But again, like, you know, there's still subtle differences there. Like the bass keeps on going throughout instead of like stopping and making space, and the vocal line also sings high.
Yeah, we
like
wanted to keep that a little more subdued, being that it's like a intro. You know, it's like this first impression, and it is what it is. It's kind of presenting the song context pre-song. How did you describe it, Jace? As like a
it's a prologue basically. I mean, you know, the Shakespearean prologue.
And then when the verse comes in, then the verse kind of kicks into this a little more energy.
Yeah. So I mean, it's rhythmically it's very similar. It's just that you start off on a lower note in the final version.
Mm-hmm.
And again, like lots of little decisions like that all around the place, you know, throughout the whole thing.
The lyrics to that prologue were just perfect. I mean, you know, hard to recall but easy to feel, which is it's sort of what music, you know, can do for you. It brings back a feeling. Like do you hear songs from that era when you used to go to the pool, and do they make you feel that way?
Jerry Rafferty.
Yeah. Baker Street.
That's what I was when we were kind of in the muck of this. That's what I kept thinking is, how can I make a kind of Jerry Rafferty song? Because I love, is it Baker Street?
Baker Street, yeah.
With the horn, and then I love the song Right Down the Line. It just like every time it comes on, like it kills me. It's just he was great, and there's really no sass in any guitar stuff, but it was just his songs just. It's just, I don't know, reminds me of being a kid. So I guess that's kind of what I was trying to do. And I don't even know if that year is correct, because that could be.
That's about right. I was in high school about then. I remember hearing that on the radio in the car. Yeah, those were a couple of my favorite songs back then.
Is it You know I need your love. You gotta hold
on me.
Just pretty.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. Maybe that.
I mean, but yeah, it's like in general songs. I mean, definitely do that kind of stuff. You know,
take you back.
Like for some reason, I don't know why. Like that the police wrapped around your finger. Like for some reason, really is. It reminds me of being 12 years old completely. Like it just takes me back to that time, and although it is funny how sometimes that can get a little diluted over time. Like if you hear it over and over the years, it's, suddenly it becomes attached to other times in your life too.
Right. Yeah.
But it gets attached to things,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's why music is the best.
Absolutely.
The best. It's like can be the warm blanket sometimes.
Yeah. Well, do you guys just want to, for that, for the fun of it, just take a peek at some of the individual tracks, and then we'll call it a night?
Sure.
Actually, as long as you brought it up, like, so you can see here that this is like the actual mix session that we were working on. It's just sort of subgrouped into like drums and percussion, bass, acoustic guitars, electric guitars, breaks. Just it made it easier to mix. But each of these obviously has got like, ridiculous amount of tracks in them. Like you look at the electric guitars, and there's like plenty of things going on. Sometimes usually small tidbits. Actually, just for fun, let's solo those up.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
So you can we'll lose a little context without the drums. Or maybe I'll just put the drums in there too, so you can hear them together. There's a main riff, and what's funny is like that main riff is actually that was like the heart of the song originally, and then eventually it got to the point where it only appears these few times.
Yeah.
It's like that's the whole song is built around it, but then it's sort of like it expands beyond that original idea so much that you kind of almost the original kernel becomes it's still a vital part of the feel of it in the verse, but it's not. Yeah. It's not the end all and be all of the song.
Mm-hmm. So Casey, in Porcupine, the riff, the guitar is kind of king. Was that hard to sometimes give it a backseat in this, or how did you approach that?
No, it was okay. I mean, this is a different thing. So it's about whatever suits the feel. And, there's really on the whole record, there's not much going on for any dirty guitar. It's pretty clean and it's nice. But keys and
a lot of acoustic guitars too. I mean, you layer a lot of, like this one, like if you go to the chorus, there's actually no electric guitar. Well, there's a little electric guitar in the chorus. Like there's just like a little bit of if we look at the chorus, it's just like this, he's got like a little muted Telecaster thing going on. That's all that's going on electric guitar wise. But then you added the acoustic guitars in, and it's all like these.
Gives it a point.
Yeah, it's all these 12 strings that are going on.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of relying on that for the power.
Gives them a little bit of this push, with the telly underneath. It's kind of.
So Jason, when you were doing that, did you have in mind what you wanted as a final product, or did you say, let's record this, and then at the end you kind of sculpted it and molded it into what you needed?
I think what we do a lot of times is we record, and it's not always the most efficient way to do it, but we record like acoustic guitar all the way through, and then we'll record. I mean, some of these things, like the telly thing, those accents, those are recorded with specific ideas in mind later on down the road when we have something more clearly defined. But I do think like these 12-string acoustics, we always had this idea of like a very big strummy, bright chorus that just sort of like opens up. Like you can hear like the way they're panned even, and versus the other guitars, it's just sort of like, I don't know if you can hear in our thing now, but it's probably all in mono. But if you listen to the recording, it just sort of like things are panned wide and the whole thing is supposed to feel like it opens up.
Mm.
And, those ideas are, they're not so much planned early on as they're just a general idea of like, okay, this is something we'd like to do. Oop, I just got a message from somebody. Interesting. Okay, sorry. Turn the ringer off. But I think honestly, I thought about this before. It's like, I'm very confident in, my abilities as a producer and engineer, but mostly I'm confident in my abilities to stumble around in the dark, and so it's like I'm confident, and being with somebody like Casey like makes you even more confident, because that like, we can stumble around together and find something that we're both going to like, or else we abandon a lot of ideas here and there. But again, it's sort of like, you don't necessarily always have a clear end goal in mind, but like I said, it's like you're chiseling away at that marble and having some idea, and then you hit upon happy accidents and you're like, oh, that was cool. I mean, that happens with Casey all the time, honestly, when we're doing vocals. I mean, you were there for some of that, like even like the ending, like the last, where is it? I'll take the solo off here. We get to that very ending, the outro vocals. I mean, I think you were there when we'd recorded that, and that was like the first take, and it was just sort of like, the instruction was, I mean, in my mind, I was thinking, okay, I'm a big Crowded House fan, and they always do these sort of like, a couple songs will just like be jamming out at the end, and Neil Finn would just be like half off mic and just kind of like, singing some, ad-libbing some sort of, poetic nonsense maybe, or something that, is just, that sounds really cool, and it's just, you have an idea that there's a vocal there, but it's not really a lead vocal or a verse. And I think that was sort of like, I said, I think we were talking about doing something like that, and Casey was like, well, give me a minute to think about something, and he, roll it, boom, and there it was. And it was like, so it's easy to stumble around when you've got somebody who can like, like whip out something like that real quick, and then be like, well, that's fantastic.
I mean, this was the song between, I think I told you that, Jace, like this one was the one where I was like, I just didn't know what would happen. I didn't even know if we'd end up just going, maybe it's not going to work, because it just seemed like a beast. It wasn't as like.
Well, honestly, as we were getting to the end, I was like, I don't even know if I like this song. I'm not like, there are times where you're like, I mean, you're kind of like, you're like, you get attached to certain parts of it and certain things, and you sort of are in the, the old, you lose the forest for the trees kind of thing. We're definitely in the trees. Yeah. And then you're like, is the forest actually anything worth spending time, wandering through? And I think ultimately now we've had some time to step away from it. I really enjoy the song, and it's like, I'm happy with the way it turned out, and it was a lot of fun to put together. But you definitely have those moments of self-doubt all the time.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, this is an example of like this. These are all the vocal layers that are going on, and here's like, if you're curious, like this is that music break, just the guitars. They're just like the. And then like at the end of it. We just had like EBOs that kind of come in at the end of it just to kind of give it some sparkly stuff.
You used an EBO on that?
Yeah, it's just, I mean, that's one of our favorite tools. It gives you like almost like keyboard sounds. Same thing at the end of there's these sort of like soaring kind of EBO notes and layers that happen at the end. And then one thing that might be interesting too, like this happened all the time too, and not in just this song, but other ones. But there's like this guitar part right here, which is just sort of a constant kind of chimey thing. Mm-hmm. Let's see. That thing, ultimately I was like, well, that's kind of a nice sort of pad, and ended up like pulling that into that's what you hear in the opening of the song. Like that actually pops up. If I can go up to electric guitars here, that's, now that's in the opening of the song.
Yeah.
Um,
I hear
this little, and just again, like, because we've got, these amazing digital tools now, you can sort of start moving things around and piecing things together and be like, I wonder what happens. And we do it all the time, where like you just move something, you can put to a grid of a beat and you just shift it over. We do that with his vocals sometimes. And it's suddenly like in fact, I think the ending where he's like singing, don't lose the summer sun. It's like over the ending progression. That was just sort of like, let's just throw it there and see what happens. And it works. It's like, oh, that's cool. I mean, I think a lot of times you can just stumble upon fun accidents like that, So I'll shut up now. I've been talking too much. Ask Casey a question.
So the line "such a big world," that kind of was evocative to me, like of youth and the world being kind of unknown.
Yeah.
But I mean, what do you remember what you were thinking about when you came up with that line?
Just being a small town kid, and kind of your whole world is just, like I said earlier, getting up and kind of going out and hanging out with your friends and kind of making your own adventures, and then coming back home at 6 to dinner.
And then if it's still light enough out, going out again.
Because I was all about like catching critters. I was obsessed with toads and frogs and stuff like that, and and just being out at night, you always felt like I was pretty free, and I hung out with older kids, so they got to stay up later. So
I love that line about the street light swarm.
in the corner we had a post, and always kind of we'd gather there, and the older kids would they'd smoke their cigarettes, and we just.
The bugs would be swarming around the street lights as it got dark. Yeah.
I don't know. It's funny how you think about stuff like that. That's so irrelevant at the time, but it's like,
yeah. Well, it's cool. It seems like sort of Jason, his exercise helped pull that imagery out of you. How did he get you to do that stream of consciousness talk that you did?
You just said, let's try this. And,
I mean, Casey's always game, so that's the main
thing.
I
was like, I like stuff like that, and it just makes you kind of comfortably uncomfortable. Like you're, I mean, I trust Jace, it's not like.
It's not like he's going to play it on a video for a whole, put it up on YouTube.
No! Damn you, Knox! No. So I trust him, and it's creative exercise, and I think it's kind of cool.
So Jason told me about another method that I think involved like each of you coming up with a line or a word even, and then trading them. And how did that work? Do you remember that?
Yeah, we would sort of, I mean, this is something we did early on when we first started doing this. And I don't think any lyrics from this project came of it, but it's just that idea of sort of, again, like when you're working by yourself, there's a lot of, fun things about that, but it's one of the things that makes it tough is it's very hard to like sort of see outside your own experience or sort of, get inspiration from anything except for your own experience. And when you've got just one other person, and in this case, I love working with Casey. So it's like he's like my favorite person to work with on this on music, and you know, you can just like put a fragment down and like even like that 77 summer, he came in with like, you know, summer 1977, and I was like, well, what if we, you know, and we changed it to 77 summer, but then we're like, what does it mean to him, and then what does it mean to me? And as we start writing the lyrics together, like what are the different things we can bring to it, you know, and how can we frame it? And even though it's all based, you know, primarily on his recollections of that, sometimes I would like inject, you know, my you know, some of my thoughts about it, and or my thoughts about my memories and how it might reflect on his, and we you know, shape the words a little bit. But that in that specific instance you were talking about, that was, we just would like use an app to like generate 3 words. We'd each had note cards. We'd write down, you know, of the 3 words, the one word that most like sort of spoke to us. And
Right.
we had like 30 seconds to do that. And like, so at the end of it, we ended up like with, you know, maybe 20 note cards each with one word on it, and we'd trade it. And then we'd have 30 seconds or a minute maybe to write a song title using that word from the other person. And then we trade again, and then we have like a minute to write a lyric line from that song. And again, like, you know, what you intend when you first write that first word down is, it's really skewed from the point of that you got at. I'm not making any sense here. It basically is, you know, you have some sort of intention when you write that word down, and you think like maybe a song with this title can mean something or can mean this. You hand it to somebody else. The song title I come up with, you know, is, you know, maybe not, doesn't use that word in the same way you intended. And then they hand it back to you, and the lyric line that you come up with doesn't necessarily relate to the song title that they had in mind. And then at the end of the day, you just throw away the song title, like, oh, what's this lyric line? What could this be? Well, what's that a title for? You know, you just keep on kind of like switching pieces out. Like we were talking about actually for a future Carousel Swan song, maybe like writing lyrics to an existing pop song that we already love. I mean, who knows? Just take a song that we love, write lyrics, new lyrics to it, phrasing and everything, and then just rip out the whole thing and just like look at that sheet of lyrics and like, okay, now what can you do with this?
Oh,
You know,
wow.
and add music to that. I mean, again, it's somewhat, it's
coming from a different, you know, different angle, you know, which is kind of fun.
it's getting
Yeah.
rid of that blank page. You know, that
Yeah.
the blank page is like, that's a scary thing. And if you just have this exercise or any number of exercises, it just gets your thought process rolling, and then, you know, before you know it, like ideas are flowing. And I honestly, like, one of my favorite things about working on this with Casey was we'd get into these certain modes. Like, you know, sometimes we'd take some downtime and not be working on it, but then we'd ramp up and be like, you know, chatting a couple times a week about it, and stay free, and we'd be chatting. You know, it'd be on our minds a lot, and there'd be many times when I'd be like walking the dog and thinking about the songs, and a lyric line would pop into my head, and I just, you know, send it Casey's way, and
Yep.
and
I'd get a text.
yeah,
but I love it because, you know, we're both kind of thinking about the, you know, that's what's great. It is nice to work with somebody else that's
Yeah.
kind of pushing you and making you think about things differently. Because I definitely have a routine in Porcupine. I mean, it's all up to me, really.
Yeah.
So,
but it's
which is
also,
fun.
yeah, and it's
Has
also,
this project had any effect on how you approach songs for Porcupine, or is it still kind of a solitary thing to get started?
Yeah, it's just me, me and the riff, but it's okay. It works, you know, for that.
Mm-hmm.
it's just more painful, maybe.
It's a lot more. I guess I go through a lot more self-doubt because I don't really have anybody to bounce it off of.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? Like, so I'll definitely go through periods of like, is that dumb? You know, that's, you know, does that make sense? Or, you know, because the guys Greg and Ian are always, I don't think they've ever shot down anything, but I think I will always bring something that's Porcupine-ish, you know,
Yeah.
a rock song or whatever. But this is just nice in that, you know, I have somebody I trust. Like, we just have these musical conversations and lyrical conversations, which I just love that.
Mhm.
I think the older I get, the more I kind of like it. It's just being pushed and
Mhm.
kind of uncomfortable. I mean, this was good.
Yeah.
Well, it's also,
Therapy.
it helps that we're
Really?
like, you know, we're in a lot of ways on the same page musically, and just sort of, and just in terms of our, you know, our general feelings about the world. It's like it might be a harder process if it was two people who are, you know, who, you know, one person is heavy metal and another person's country music. You know, it's like that process would be much more difficult. But I think we have our own sort of personal tastes and some differences here and there, and that I think it's only a good thing. But you know, in general, it's like we're able to challenge each other, but within the limits of like still being productive.
Yeah.
So is there what is at the core of what you're shooting for with Carousel Swan songs? Is there any sort of unifying thing about them?
I guess in the end, there's a really grand kind of sonic bigness about it that I admire. And that's just Jason's production is, to me, like, it's amazing, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I can describe a feeling to him. That's what, when we first met in
91.
91, I remember when we first started doing Dream 13 stuff, like describing just, I'd like it to sound like a blah, 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 like a, you know, a waterfall or a, you know, or something. And he would go, oh, okay. And then he would go like this. And then he'd just get it, you know, the feel. It was always about the feel of things. Cause I'm not like I just want to write songs that I like, and somebody else feels something when they listen to it. And Jace helps me kind of make that happen, you know?
Oh, that's nice, Dave. Thanks.
There were some really cool sonic, I don't know if you want to call them tricks, but things that in 77 Summer where the vocals, when he's singing, it sounds like he's falling into a hole, like it, you know, with like the way you play with the reverb.
Yeah, we can look at some of that. I mean, like, real quickly. I mean, just so you know, we've got like maybe 4 minutes left here. We probably should call it at that. And
Sure.
just to kind of cycle back to your other question, I kind of feel like, you know, we didn't really know what we were doing at first, and, you know, when we first started recording this stuff. But now, like when I think about like what we did for this EP, and I think what we would like to do going forward, I think, to me, it feels like the music we liked as kids a lot just has a sense of elevated reality, you know, where it's like, it's almost like theater in a way, you know. It's like, so it's obviously not real. It's sort of like bigger than life, but it sort of hits you harder emotionally because of that. You know, it's like, you know, it's something, you know, I don't know if that's the right way to describe it, but just, you know, a way of like.
No, I thought that was great, actually. I think you nailed it.
Yeah.
Kind of exaggerated.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it's a bit of theater. You know, it's like we even talked about that when we were writing lyrics. You know, like this is, I mean, you know, obviously some of the songs are pulled from our personal experiences, but we also gave ourselves the freedom to like not be bound by that. You know, like to like, okay, we can go outside of that, and these songs are just, they're about a character, perhaps. You know? So it's a way of not feeling so self-conscious. In terms of lyrics, let me just see here once.
Are you talking like, Randy, at the end, the last bit is very like
I think that's where I heard that. Yeah.
Yeah, there's
Push
just
back, and I like how you mix that, Jace, because it's kind of
Like maybe the last
up front,
chorus.
it's just
Yeah.
more this kind of afterthought.
yeah. I mean, that's the idea. Is like it's. I mean, I know that that's got the choruses have always got sort of big stacked kind of vocals that maybe have a quick delay on them. Let's see once. What's this?
Don't lose the summer sun in such a big world.
So you can. I mean, there's most of the vocals are pretty dry. There's usually like a bit of chorus or quick delay on it. But at the end, there's like this kind of weird, like I think a Roland space echo or something is playing in there along with it, and it's also like, pushing the balance more toward the echo than the dry vocal, so it feels a little bit sort of, hearing the specific vocals at that point don't even matter as much as like just the general shape of it and the sense, like the fact that you lose the vocals a little bit almost makes it feel bigger because it's like it's being sort of consumed by all the music there. So this is.
If there's still daylight, can we go back again? If there's still daylight.
So like the echo is like much louder than the actual dry vocal, and like also at that ending, there's also like this thing going on where I always had this vision of like Casey said, that ending kind of explodes, and to me I always had this, like if there was a music video for this, I always had this cliche, like again I go back to like being corny and cliche of like some crane or drone shot of like circling around a hilltop or something like that, and there's something like really elevated about that. And so we just did this thing where we had, once the mix was at a certain point and pretty much done, just printed that whole thing out and then put that little segment on a track and then ran it through a phaser, so you can hear this sort of like weird movement.
If there's still daylight, can we go back again? If there's still
Let's see once. You can't really hear it. Let me solo it up a little bit. You can hear it a little. It's probably not in stereo either. If you're hearing stereo, it's got that sense of like swirling.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, just mixing a little bit of that in along with the rest of the mix. I think the rest of the mix kind of ducks down a little bit there. And you can, there's a little hint of just this swirl at the very end of it. And, again, those are all like the kind of production things that we just sneak in throughout the whole thing just to kind of give, it's ear candy, and it's kind of stringing the listener along to keep them interested, hopefully.
Well, it's easy to see how you could spend 1,000 hours on this project.
It was a really fun project, and we hope to do more. It's just a matter of being able to figure out the logistics and work it around other projects and such. I mean, honestly, if I had my way, it'd be a full-time job for me. I'm just like, okay, we're gonna pay $200,000 a year. Go right with Casey, okay? It doesn't work that way.
That would be the dream.
Yeah,
That would be the dream.
does not work that way anymore. Might have at one point, but again, like it's it's the writing and all that stuff that is that we love and enjoy. So it's never been about making money.
Yeah. But I mean, it just seems like I wish there was a way to make sure that more people heard this music, because to me it's brilliant.
Well, that's really nice of you.
Yeah, thanks, Randy.
I mean, I just in this day and age, I don't know exactly what you do. Besides, unless you like, I mean, that's the one advantage of being on a label these days, I suppose, is they have the connections to promotion and that kind of thing.
Right.
But we haven't made any effort to like get signed. I don't even know if that's something we'd want to do. It's sort of like, it's sort of been nice to be sort of independent. I mean, I would love to be able to like do a song where we, I let go of some of the production stuff and we find a producer that we really admire and work with them in some way. But I don't necessarily foresee it ever getting to that point. And then again, and part of it is just like, part of the sound was sort of like, it was just us creating it together, and what we both brought to the table essentially.
Yeah. Well, And on 77 Summer, that was you, Jason, on bass guitar and drums and keyboards.
Yeah. I mean, drums were. What's that?
You played a lot of guitar too.
Did you?
He's playing the echoed middle bit.
Oh,
That's Jace.
dude.
Jace, I was gonna say producer named Andy Partridge.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind that. That'd be nice.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that'd be dare to dream.
Yeah.
Dare to
He's not XTC's not keeping him that busy these days. I
No.
bet.
That's right. He's putting out records with other bands. So
He's
Yeah.
an amazing
Hello?
guy.
Hit him up. Hit him up. Send him this.
Andy.
I follow him on Twitter. I could send him something, but I don't think he'd be. I mean, if we lived in England, maybe we'd probably go over there and stalk him a little bit. But,
Yeah.
but yeah, all these songs have got different layers of things, and the drums actually in this one are actually fake. It's programmed, and it was
Really?
It started out. I mean, I think I played some of it on electric kit to begin with, but
Okay.
then ultimately it was just like, my timing was a little bit off, and it was just I just used that. It was nice for like getting the general feel, the sort of disco feel of it. That kind of came from just playing it on the electric kit, and then at that point you just kind of program things to kind of fit. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't feel like I have no qualms about like saying that stuff is programmed. I mean, hell, most of the keyboards technically are programmed because even though I play parts, it's all in MIDI, and you can totally mess up and change it and move it around. So it's essentially kind of programmed.
Yeah.
Guitars, vocals, that stuff you can't really program in that way. Although you can edit it to crazy degrees.
So how much of this album did you play acoustic drums on?
Well, there's only 3 songs with acoustic drums, and that's
Okay.
and I didn't play those. Those are played by our friend Dan Reinhold.
Okay.
He came into a studio in Chicago. We just rented a day, and I mean it was great. I loved doing that. And ultimately, honestly, like sonically, those drums are also augmented by samples. There's the live drums, which I think number one, you get the feel of live drums and there's a sonic room sound to it. And performance quality that's nice for live drums, and then we just kind of goose them up a little bit with some samples. Mostly it's more a matter of logistics because all this other stuff you can create in our spare bedrooms or living rooms very easily, especially with the sample technology now. But whereas live drums, to actually get good live drum sound, you need a decent studio with decent mics for the most part. I mean, depends on what you're going for. And we're kind of shooting for a bit of a polished sound. So, it's not just a lo-fi 2 mic setup in your living room.
Mission accomplished.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That was fun. I mean,
It was
yeah.
very well done.
Well, thanks for chatting with us about it, and hopefully it's interesting to other people out there. I'll probably edit this down to like 10 minutes.
Awesome.
I'll keep it. We'll keep it raw.
Thanks again, Randy.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it was fun. I was really nervous. Because I say a lot and stumble over words a lot. But it was fun talking with you guys about this, and I got some new insights on that song.
Cool. Well, thanks for playing along, and of course, like thanks for all the support like along the way. So
Yeah.
It's nice to know. I mean, like then even like when we put those first rough mixes out there, like you were always very enthusiastic, and it was sort of like a little bit of a, it was a little bit of fuel early on to kind of like, we should keep on working on this and polishing it. So it's appreciated.
Yeah.
Glad to do it.
Cool. Well, you guys have a good night. Thanks for taking the time to do this.